Major concerns surrounding the past of Maryland's head of juvenile services. How a resurfaced report claims he let a maximum security prisoner escape from his home. A rise in unsolved violent crime has state leaders sounding the alarm.
All violent crimes in Maryland are more likely to go unsolved today than a decade ago.
We asked them what can be done to bring closure to more cases. House Republicans pushing to change current marijuana laws.
The bill that was pushed through was not well thought out.
Why they argue the laws are making communities less safe and what they're doing about it. A fire in Baltimore County reignites concerns over staffing and equipment shortages.
2 engines being out of service daily.
Why the fire union president says it's putting both residents and firefighters' lives at risk.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
We begin with breaking news on the campaign trail. Former President Donald Trump has won the Republican primary in New Hampshire, defeating Nikki Haley for a second time after his victory in Iowa.
President Joe Biden won the Democratic primary as a write-in candidate. Nikki Haley has vowed to stay in the GOP race. We'll have a live report from New Hampshire with reaction from both candidates coming up.
Fox 45 News has uncovered a report from the D.C. Inspector General's office outlining a major security violation involving Department of Juvenile Services Secretary Vincent Schiraldi while he was working in Washington in 2008. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. That report details a barbecue at Schiraldi's house in which he apparently invited youth offenders from a maximum security prison without any handcuffs or restraints. One of the juveniles allegedly escaped from his basement. Law enforcement experts argue the report outlines another example of how Schiraldi's juvenile crime strategies are falling short.
You can't sit down and give these kids a lollipop, you know. They only learn from being treated with tough laws and being sentenced behind bars.
Well, these questions come as lawmakers and police continue to raise red flags about a lack of consequences for violent offenders at any age.
The sobering statistics coming to light during a hearing at the State House this afternoon.
Clearly, there's no certainty when 2/3 of homicides aren't solved and 70% of rapes aren't solved and 75% of robberies aren't solved. There is no certainty. People are committing crimes and getting away with, literally getting away with murdering.
Tonight, Mackenzie Frost looks into the heated debate surrounding accountability in Annapolis.
But our team coverage begins with Jeff Abel digging into this report from D.C. and the concern surrounding why Schiraldi would host an event with clear security risks. Jeff?
You know, Vincent Schiraldi spent 5 years as Director of Juvenile Corrections in Washington, and tonight we're getting a much clearer picture of an investigation that found he repeatedly violated the very security policies he was supposed to be enforcing.
Test. Mic check.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you all here.
It was last week when Juvenile Services Secretary Vincent Schiraldi was preaching accountability.
Instead, we need to better engage young people while holding them accountable.
But there are questions about Schiraldi's own history. In 2008, Schiraldi was director of D.C.'s Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, and an investigation by Washington's Inspector General revealed that Schiraldi violated the very security policies he was supposed to be enforcing. The violations stem from the unrestrained transport of 3 offenders from a maximum security youth facility. The report says Schiraldi had the 3 transported to his home for a cookout, and according to the report, after one of the Oak Hill residents asked the director's wife for permission to go to the basement to look for his cellular telephone, the resident went to the basement alone and unescorted and escaped. Investigators say Schiraldi objected to placing residents in physical restraints during transport, and he admitted that DYRS procedures had been violated.
Yeah, it's very disturbing, and I would think, I don't know where the secretary got that idea to bring him home, but it's not like you're dealing with an altar boy or somebody from the church.
Retired U.S. Marshal Johnny Hughes says the relaxed treatment of maximum security offenders could have put other lives in danger.
You can't sit down with these juveniles and have cupcakes and crumpets and milk. I mean, many of these juveniles, they're more astute and more dangerous than adults.
In the end, investigators ruled that Schiraldi had violated 5 departmental policies, writing, "The director allowed his personal feelings regarding security restraints and other security procedures to create a relaxed atmosphere, which resulted in DYRS personnel failing to properly secure, restrain, and maintain visual contact with residents while they were being transported to and moving within the director's home." It would take 22 days before the escapee was recaptured.
To me, it's just thinking not in a normal manner, okay?
So far, neither Schiraldi nor the governor's office has responded to our questions about this probe. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thank you. Lawmakers and police in New York are also questioning Schiraldi's crime strategies. He spent 7 months as the corrections commissioner in New York before coming to Maryland. While in New York, he oversaw operations at Rikers Island. An independent court found leadership and accountability within the State Department of Corrections severely lacking. A police union leader argues Schiraldi pushed the system at Rikers to its breaking point.
He came in here with this mindset of providing everything for the inmate population and not providing things that we needed. Wasn't concerned about our well-being at all. So he made it unsafe for us. He created armies in these housing areas. He really put us at a very disadvantage and made the job more dangerous than it ever was.
I can't believe somebody would hire this guy after what we've been through in New York City. It just shows you there was a lack of really vetting this person.
Fox 45 News asked the governor's office about what steps his administration took to vet Secretary Schiraldi and if the governor is aware of the humanitarian crisis at Rikers Island. So far, we have not received a response.
Governor Moore has been a vocal supporter of Schiraldi, even as the secretary faces pushback for his views on juvenile crime. Schiraldi believes young people should be kept out of adult prisons until they turn 25 because research shows their brains aren't fully developed. Schiraldi has also spoken out against parole and probation, saying he doesn't believe it rehabilitates young offenders. But critics tell Fox 45 News the message doesn't match up with what's needed to curb crime across the state.
When it comes to hearing from DJS specifically, what do you want to hear from the secretary about what's going on?
His resignation. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I just don't think he gets it.
You're basically saying up until the age of 25, which is what he wants to do, you get a free ride.
Unfortunately, legislators, lawmakers, have decided that it's better to support the lawbreakers rather than those who are enforcing the law.
The Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office says DJS hasn't been transparent about which juveniles are detained and which ones are released. The deputy chief of the juvenile division got into a heated exchange with Schiraldi last month about how DJS handles cases.
Secretary Schiraldi, I would really love to see your data.
Absolutely.
Because, and this is from 22.
Yeah, and you're going to see the next one in less than a month. I'd like to see some data from you, though. I'm not really hearing too much data from your office.
City State's Attorney Ivan Bates pushing for legislation to remove some of the guesswork from the process, aiming to put the decision in the hands of a judge. Last year, he said nearly a third of cases sent to DJS should have gone directly to a judge instead.
State Senator Corey McCray from Baltimore says that he hasn't had a working relationship with DJS since Secretary Schiraldi took the helm. He tells Fox 45 News that he's drafting legislation calling for more transparency from the department.
When we have juveniles that's engaged in a fatal shooting or a non-fatal shooting, I want to understand what is the after action. How, if they were under the purview of DJS. If they were under the purview of DJS, I think that the Secretary Schiraldi has the responsibility to be able to communicate when did his agency make contact. How do we know that retaliation isn't going to exist? How do we know that someone isn't going to continue to come after this young man or young woman that's under their purview? And he should be able to articulate that in a manner that anybody can understand.
And that brings us to our question of the day. Do you think Vincent Schiraldi is the right person to lead DJS? So far, 93% of those who voted say no. You can head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
These concerns over the Department of Juvenile Services come as Maryland lawmakers are trying to get a better read on how the state handles violent crime. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost was in Annapolis today for a hearing on some of the issues surrounding the crime response.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
On tap for the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee.
Trend lines, vice headlines.
A look at crime trends in Maryland. The nonpartisan nonprofit Council of State Governments Justice Center clearly outlining the declining number of violent crimes getting solved.
And all violent crimes in Maryland are more likely to go unsolved today than a decade ago.
Maryland seeing a 35% increase in homicides since 2012. The state has the third highest violent crime rate in the region, behind Washington, D.C. and New York City.
There's a place where there's an opportunity to think about increasing accountability and also responding more effectively to the people who commit violent crime.
Lawmakers facing the reality communities simply don't feel safe. To improve, the group says there needs to be certainty of consequences for criminals.
Clearly, there's no certainty when 2/3 of homicides aren't solved and 70% of rapes aren't solved and 75% of robberies aren't solved. There is no certainty. People are committing crimes and literally getting away with murder.
If we really want to get serious about deterring future violence, solving violent crime is really going to be a big piece of that equation, and making sure that folks are held accountable.
Some lawmakers, like Senator William Folden from Frederick County, say there simply aren't enough officers to handle the volume of crime.
So we're seeing some increases in violent crime, and we're seeing a dramatic drop-off in the number of police officers who are available to be that resource to investigate these violent crimes, and we're seeing unsolved rates at ridiculously high numbers, and that's just not fair to the community, it's not fair to law enforcement, and it's certainly not fair to the victims.
The data shows people don't feel safe, and we question the leader of the Senate.
As clouds increase, we're tracking our next weather maker. We'll tell you when it arrives.
Maryland Republicans are working to chip away at a new state law preventing officers from stopping drivers for the smell of marijuana. How they say they're working to make communities safer.
Republican lawmakers are pushing back on parts of the state's cannabis laws, which they say impact police officers' ability to do their jobs.
Fox 45's Jessica Babb joins us live with what those lawmakers want changed. Jessica?
Tomorrow, there's a hearing on a piece of legislation that would prohibit someone from smoking or consuming cannabis in a car with a minor. Another piece of legislation Republicans are pushing for would change the wording in the state's cannabis odor law.
We need to protect our children.
There's new legislation hitting the table.
The bill we're proposing would make it a criminal offense to smoke marijuana, either smoke it or vape it, while in the confines of an automobile with a juvenile inside.
A proposal with support from both sides of the aisle.
I wholeheartedly agree with the bill in reference to its intent. I have 4 kids. It's not something that I want for my kids, but it's not anything that I want for any of my young scholars across the state of Maryland.
With lawmakers considering changes to cannabis laws, Delegate Robert Long's bill is playing into other Republican efforts.
I think it should help.
With some trying to walk back the state's current laws.
I think that's what it's intended for.
One of the Republican caucus's, top 5 crime-reducing bills to repeal the inability for a police officer to search a car on the suspicion of cannabis odor.
I thought that law went too far and stopping the officers from doing their jobs.
Delegate Jason Buckle says they're trying to change the wording in the current law that prevents police from searching a car based on the smell of cannabis.
Our bill essentially would change that and would allow police officers a little bit broader discretion without saying that every time you smell marijuana, that's justification for a full-blown search, but it can be one of the factors that goes into your investigative activity.
To me, it's no different than drinking alcohol in the car that is illegal, and you should have the ability to search the car.
State's attorneys say the state's cannabis laws, as they are, have created problems.
In my jurisdiction, 80% of the guns we seized illegally on the streets of my county last year came out of car searches because of the odor of marijuana. We're not getting those 80% anymore.
Supporters like the ACLU say the law helps eliminate cases of racial profiling and protecting people's privacy. When asked if the Republican efforts have a chance at success,
I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, any legislation here that is getting tougher on crime is a tough sell in Annapolis.
When you have a large industry that's being created, newly created, that there are tweaks that have to happen.
I reached out to numerous other Democrats in the House to see what they thought of the legislation being proposed. So far, I haven't heard back from them. Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
2 Navy SEALs lost their lives in the line of duty, including Maryland native and Navy Special Warfare Operations First Class Christopher Chambers. He's pictured on the left side of your screen. He and Navy Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram disappeared January 11th while attempting to board a ship to search for weapons bound for the Houthi rebels in Yemen. One Navy SEAL fell into the water due to 8-foot-high swells. The second disappeared after diving in to help him. Chambers was 37 years old.
On Twitter today, Governor Wes Moore called the deaths heartbreaking and asked that all Marylanders keep both service members in their thoughts and prayers.
Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination in New Hampshire's primary election. Coming up, a live report with reaction from both Trump and Nikki Haley, who vowed to stay in the race.
And finally getting a warm up and coming out of the deep freeze today in Maryland. We were up into those 40s, had some snow and some ice finally melting off out there. This is just the beginning. We have much milder air on the march into the state, going to push us into the 50s, even 60s later this week, and quite a bit of rain on the march. We'll detail when that arrives coming up.
And a live look at M&T Bank Stadium as we head to break. Excitement in the air as the Ravens prepare to host their first AFC Championship game this Sunday.
You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now. Three. We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember, in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great.
Former President Donald Trump wins the Republican primary in New Hampshire.
But rival Nikki Haley is vowing to stay in the fight despite the loss.
Brian Crandall with our Sinclair sister station is covering the election and joins us live from Nashua, New Hampshire. Brian?
Well, Kai and Mary, Trump supporters are wrapping up their celebration here at this hotel in Nashua, where the former president just finished speaking a short time ago. But if Donald Trump thought his win was going to knock Nikki Haley out of this race, he was wrong. And whether she has a realistic path forward from here remains to be seen. The voters of New Hampshire have spoken, delivering Donald Trump a win along his quest to return to the White House. But the only other Republican left in the race, Nikki Haley, won't clear the way.
New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go.
The Trump victory is sweet for his diehard supporters, undaunted by his legal troubles.
I honestly believe that our country is worth saving, and I want to be part of that.
Michael Demers has been volunteering for the Trump campaign in his home state of New Hampshire.
I've been making phone calls and knocking doors and working hard for Dawn, so I'm here to just enjoy the party.
And over 150 rallies in 42 states.
Donna Eden of Pennsylvania rolled into Trump's victory party in her RV, decked out in MAGA signs and merch, which she's been selling across the country for 5 years.
Trump has made our nation so much better, and now we're just in a rut. It's going to be civil war, I think.
Now, Joe Biden is the projected winner on the Democratic side with a write-in campaign because his name wasn't on the ballot. His campaign put out a statement tonight saying that Trump's win here means that, quote, the election-denying anti-freedom MAGA movement has completed its takeover of the Republican Party. Live in New Hampshire, I'm Brian Crandall for Fox 45.
Ahead at 10:30, fire union leaders raise concern about a delayed response to a Catonsville fire, what they say needs to change to avoid potential tragedy.
I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Coming up, new details about the closed-door testimony of Hunter Biden's art dealer and the unconventional request he says the first son made. That request raising eyebrows.
We are following breaking news out of South Baltimore. A 6-year-old boy is dead after he was stabbed multiple times in the back. Police say he was pronounced dead at the hospital. They say the stabbing is domestic related. Authorities say the mother's boyfriend stabbed the 6-year-old. The boyfriend is in custody, according to police. We are following 3 big stories at 10:30. The investigation into the Biden family's finances continues, while lawmakers heard from Hunter Biden's art dealer and the unconventional request he says the president's son made.
The Office of Legislative Services finds the Baltimore Police Department racked up more than $66 million in overtime in a year and a half. Why some say the high price comes down to a lack of oversight.
The Baltimore County Fire Department's union says staffing and overtime problems are putting residents at risk.
We've dealt with that before in the past, but now it's every single day that we're placing 2 engines out of service.
The union president points to a fire in Catonsville today as an example of why the system the county has in place isn't working.
Fox 45's Keith Daniels joins us live in studio to explain it all to us. Keith?
Well, Mary and Kai, the union president says someone was seriously hurt in that Catonsville fire. He's not blaming it on the department's current policy of taking engines out of service, but he does say the budget issue is a serious concern. When the alarm sounds,
Presidential Fire 418 Lambeth Road.
Crews roll.
Engine 4, engine 41, engine 13, engine 352 came out to respond.
Baltimore County firefighters chasing the flames.
Caller called in and advised that the neighbor's house is on fire.
Tuesday afternoon, a fire on Lambeth Road near Northdale Road in Catonsville. Crews responded to a burning home with someone trapped inside. The victim rescued, taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The incident now.
Any delay in responses is never a good delay.
Reigniting a hot topic. John Sabega, president of the Baltimore County Fire Union, Local 1311, says one fire engine had been placed out of service for this call.
Dispatch to Station 4. Which engine from your station is in service? Which one is out?
Sabega says, according to the department's current policy, 2 engines are taken out of service during weekdays on a rotating basis at locations because of staffing and overtime issues. Sabega ringing the alarm because he believes the practice puts firefighters and residents' lives at risk when valuable time is lost.
Because if there is a incident, a fire that's actually there, they grow exponentially for every 30 seconds that nobody is there to making any attempts to mitigate the fire. So that's obviously a critical, time-sensitive need.
Sabega posted his latest concern on the union's social media Tuesday, saying in part, the decision to rotate fire engine closures throughout the county is not working. No fire engine should be placed out of service for overtime issues.
Those engines and that equipment is there for specific reasons. It's not like something that we just plopped down in an area and just figured this is okay to be put out of service and everything will be fine.
Meantime, Baltimore County Fire Chief Joanne Rund believing there is no safety threat, previously releasing a statement over union concerns, saying in part, the Baltimore County Fire Department responds to 150,000 calls a year. Every week, we hear from residents pleased with and grateful for the service we provide, adding we will continue an aggressive agenda to strengthen our frontline response and to support our members. Still, for Sabega,
making decisions solely and wholly based on dollars and cents isn't always the best decision.
Well, Sabega says there's about 120 vacancies in the fire department, partly because of the county's longer retirement requirement. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. The Baltimore City Fire Union expressed similar concerns after a deadly row home fire in North Baltimore this weekend, claiming the lives of a couple who had lived there for decades. The union claims 20% of Baltimore City's fire engines weren't operating on the day of the fire because of staffing shortages. That includes the closest fire engine less than a mile from the elderly couple's home.
When you have the first due company that's not there, we can't say it would be impactful, but further away a company has to respond. So when seconds count, that's an issue. Fire grows exponentially larger as the seconds go by. So for our members to have to travel further distances and everything else, it's unsafe for us as well.
Yesterday, Fox 45 sent questions to the fire department about response times and staffing shortages. Spokesperson Kevin Cartwright responded saying that information is not readily available.
A state audit is taking aim at alleged overtime malpractice within the Baltimore Police Department, in which employees racked up more than $66 million in overtime in less than 2 years. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor looks into why the audit blames the lack of oversight and accountability within city police.
A newly released 56-page audit finding BPD leadership not properly policing overtime wages within the department. The report claiming between January 2021 to June 2022, BPD's overtime wages costing the city more than $66 million. Auditors concluding a lack of oversight and disciplinary action is what's leading to excessive overtime being paid to certain officers.
$66 million is a lot of taxpayer money that's being paid out, and taxpayers and all citizens of Baltimore aren't ensured that this money is going for the purposes it's supposed to, protecting them.
In 2022 alone, the auditors finding 100 officers recording more than 1,000 hours of overtime, of which the department's top 10 earners all doubling their base salaries with overtime. Auditors claiming these individuals routinely violated key overtime requirements.
They're wasting police resources and they're wasting taxpayer dollars.
Other findings of the audit, BPD did not require reviews to ensure that officers did not work more than 32 hours of voluntary overtime per week, a policy BPD allegedly broke at least 693 times in 2022. Long shifts, former Deputy Commissioner Jason Johnson says, could cost more than taxpayers.
The officers working many hours in a day, several days in a row, and really not getting enough sleep for a job where you're expected to make life and death decisions at any time. So it certainly from a health and safety and wellness standpoint is not good.
In response, the department blaming staffing shortages and arguing it's still struggling to implement a new payroll system, which rolled out in December of 2020. Moving forward, BPD vowing to improve training for payroll compliance, conduct regular internal audits of overtime activity, and improve distribution of overtime in compliance with BPD policy. Johnson among those applauding the changes, but also questioning why weren't they implemented sooner.
It is a difficult and complicated problem. We all should acknowledge that. And also at the same time, we can acknowledge that it's probably something that should be solved by now.
In Baltimore City, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby was back in court today for day 2 of her second federal trial.
The jury heard opening statements yesterday, and today prosecutors called more witnesses to the stand, but it's still unclear if Nick or Marilyn Mosby will testify. She's facing 2 counts of mortgage fraud stemming from her purchase of 2 Florida vacation homes. Mosby's first federal trial ended with a guilty verdict for 2 perjury charges. The trial lasted 10 days. Fox 45 News spoke with a defense attorney not affiliated with the case who says that this could be a similar timeline.
This case appears to be between 5 and 7 days to try, mostly government witnesses. The difference in this case will be whether Marilyn Mosby takes the stand, because that in and of itself could be a day and a half to 2 days, depending on the length of her testimony. And then if we see Nick Mosby testifying, is the government going to call him as a witness? And then is Marilyn Mosby's team going to recall him if they desire to elicit different testimony?
For full coverage on the Mosby trial and the latest developments from court, head to foxbaltimore.com.
A new Harvard-Harris poll finds immigration is a key issue with voters. 35% called it the most important issue facing the nation today. It comes as Border Patrol agents will now be able to remove razor wire state officials installed to try to prevent migrants from entering the country. The Supreme Court siding with the Justice Department.
The Biden administration was arguing that the Texas law enforcement was essentially circumventing and usurping the power of the U.S. federal government, who has exclusive purview in the enforcement of immigration law.
This isn't just a victory for Biden's open border policy. This is a victory for the cartels, who are now going to be able to exploit the border more easily to push drugs, criminals, and national security threats into our country.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he will not back down despite the high court's decision. He says he'll continue to use the National Guard to keep migrants out. That brings us to our national question of the day. Do you approve of the Biden administration's handling of the crisis at the border? So far, 99% of voters say they disapprove. Head to foxbaltimore.com, click on the Pulse tab to weigh in.
New details come to light regarding lucrative sales of Hunter Biden's artwork. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the story.
Hunter Biden's talent for painting fine art still very much up for debate, yet some of his works fetched handsome prices established artists would envy, causing skeptics to ask what exactly were people paying for and was it legal? In an attempt to answer this question, House Republicans summoned Hunter Biden's art dealer for a closed-door deposition. It's part of their investigation into the Biden family's finances as they work to shed light on the shadowy parts of the first family's businesses. According to the transcript of the deposition released Monday, the art dealer told Congress Hunter insisted on knowing the names of the people who bought his art. The dealer conceding the request was not conventional, adding Hunter was the only artist the gallery represented that wanted to know who was buying his art. That stipulation later revised, so the gallery was not required to disclose the buyers' identities. This after questions about the ethics of these art transactions came into the spotlight. For example, one of the buyers, prominent Democratic donor Elizabeth Hirsch-Naftali, received a White House appointment from Joe Biden. Hirsch-Naftali bought $94,000 worth of Hunter Biden's art. The dealer's testimony also appears to contradict reports from the White House. In 2021, the White House saying they helped create an agreement that would separate Hunter Biden from his buyers.
The selling of his art will all happen through the gallerists, and the names and individuals will be kept confidential. We will not be aware, neither will he be aware.
The art dealer told Congress that report surprised him. He never spoke to the White House.
We were shocked to learn that George Burgess never communicated with anyone from the White House. This is another lie by the White House.
Hunter Biden has agreed to sit for a closed-door deposition with Congress on February 28th. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
It is being called the largest military sexual assault scandal in recent history. Still ahead, Spotlight on America investigates a sprawling abuse case involving an Army doctor.
And weather-wise today, it was much milder out there. Even tonight, we're still about 10 degrees above the freezing mark in Baltimore. So it looks like a much milder setup as we go into the next several days, and rain on the march coming in out of the Gulf Coast. We'll talk about how much rain we can expect when it arrives. All those details coming up.